Alright, so I really wanted to do this video because I wanted to see if we could improve Snorlax Stall. One of my favorite decks to play. Twilight Masquerade's just come out. We got 100 and something new cards to utilize and look at, and I figured out of those cards there's got to be something that improves or adds a new flavor to the Snorlax Stall deck. So I went through all of them and I came across 5 cards that I felt would make Snorlax Stall better, or just give it something slightly different, just to confuse the opponent a bit, or give us a different type of advantage in a game. So from the 5 cards, there's 4 item cards and 1 Pokemon. I'm going to show you the 1 Pokemon at the end, just because I feel like it's a really awesome addition to the deck, and I think it's the best addition to the deck actually. So do stick around to see that Pokemon, but I'm going to start right away with our first item, which is our first trainer card, which is the accompanying flute. So previously what I had was 3 Erica's invitations, and we all know what Erica's invitation does. I'm not going to go over that, but we've got the accompanying flute now. So I've gone down 2 Erica's, 1 accompanying flute. So accompanying flute lets you look at the top 5 cards of your opponent's deck, and from there, if there are any basic Pokemon, you can take those basic Pokemon and put them onto your opponent's bench. I like this card in the beginning of a game. It's something that can also be fetched with Arven, and it fills up the bench with what we want him to have on his bench. So whether that be a bench full of EX Pokemon, then we just have Mimikyu up front in our active zone and it's an automatic win, or we find other support Pokemon that he may not really need in this kind of matchup and we stick that onto his bench. And then again, if we do come across something, it's because it's a May ability, we don't actually have to put those Pokemon onto the bench. So 1 accompanying flute. Our next addition, Community Center, card number 2 from Twilight Masquerade. This I've replaced with Artisan. Now, Artisan itself, let me just bring it back there. There we go, Artisan. It is a good card in fetching basic Pokemon to put onto our bench, but I found it a bit redundant at times, and it also gave our opponent an advantage where he could use it and put cards onto his bench as well, and he could find those Dreepies or whatever other basic Pokemon that he really needed to get out to his bench, and it put us in a bit of a tough position. And I never felt like the Snorlax deck actually had any problems getting the Pokemon that we need, with the Arvens fetching the Nest Balls, with getting a Rotom out nice and early and drawing 3 cards a turn. We get to those basic Pokemon and we can find the ones we need pretty easy. So that's why I figured Community Center might come in quite handy, especially because there's a lot of damage counter decks at the moment going around, moving around damage counters or putting damage counters on Pokemon. This Community Center slows them down in a way. After using a supporter card, each 10 we get to heal 10 damage from our Pokemon, from all Pokemon that currently have damage counters on them. With this card now obviously healing as we use supporter cards and us not doing any damage, it has no use to our opponent. Basically there's no point in our opponent having it, and it helps us as we continuously remove damage counters, especially if we don't have a penny on hand to remove them completely. It will help slow down our opponent. So a community center instead of an Artisan, which I preferred. Another one which I have been testing out in the Snorlax deck instead of the Hero's Cape is the Survival Brace. Now if you remember, the Survival Cape, sorry, not the Survival Cape, the Hero's Cape, which I had previously had in the deck, gives us an extra 100 HP. With the Survival Brace, what it does is that a full HP Pokemon cannot be knocked out. So this will keep our Pokemon alive with 10 HP, and then once the damage is done, reduces him to 10 HP. Survival Brace will obviously go to the discard pile. Why I don't like this card is because of the damage counter situation, and it only really works as a full HP Pokemon. Sometimes it can cause an issue there where you would rather have a Hero's Cape instead of a Survival Brace. where I have liked this card, and where what I found in battle, what I've really liked, is I put a survival brace on my Rotom right in the beginning, where we're just using Rotom to turn out the 3 cards that we need every turn. I'm sure you've come across a lot of times playing this deck that by the time our opponent has built up, he will switch in our Rotom with either a boss's order or some other form which allows him to move it to the active zone and then knocks it out and takes 2 prize cards. Survival Brace gives us another turn of drawing 3 cards where we may need. Our 4th card that I want to look at is Hassle. So Hassle I replaced Iono with Hassle. And the reason being is mainly because Iono at an endgame situation would fill up our opponent's deck basically back with cards, because by that time they either have 2-3 prize cards and maybe a handful of 20 cards. We play Iono, all those cards go back to deck, and that milling process then becomes more tedious because now he has more cards that we need to try and get rid of, and it kind of gives him a bit more time to try and figure out how to beat us. With Hassle, after a Pokemon is knocked out, which does happen in this deck, we do generally lose a Pokemon, and we want to have a Pokemon get knocked out so that our counter catchers can become active. We can look at the top 8 cards and we can put any 3 cards into our hand. I think it's a great resource builder. And once something has been knocked out, we grab 3 cards from the top 8, fill our hand up with some useful pieces that we may need, and so that's why Hassle, I feel, has been quite effective in this deck instead of using an Iono in those situations. And now for card number 5, the Pokemon that I have been using. So now I want to tell you about the Pokemon I've replaced, which is Mantine. So I've taken Mantine out. I never felt that this Pokemon was useful in the Snorlax deck, to be honest. It does have a purpose when it can be used, but never really had it in the active zone. I don't think, out of all the times that I played the deck, I don't think I've ever actually had it in the active zone and I've used the Bornashore attack on it. And I'm sure maybe there has been situations, very unique situations, that it's probably come in handy for you, but for me I never used it. But there was a card that Twilight Masquerade brought out that could create another win con, or give us another opportunity to win, and that is the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX. And because of its ability, Cornerstone Stance, where it reads prevent all damage from attacks done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon that have an ability. Now, there are very rare occasions where every single Pokemon on your opponent's bench and active zone have an ability, but there are cases. I actually have had a couple games, one of them being the Goldengo deck, where my opponent had all of the Pokemon on the field were a Pokemon with an ability. Put Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX into the active zone and game was over. There was nothing my opponent could do. He was untouchable. And so this gives us, like a Mimikyu, like a Snorlax, gives us another opportunity to win. Where it may seem unlikely, we have the Ogerpon to basically give us another chance, another way of victory. Again, maybe very rare moments that it will come in handy and actually win you a game, but I have had more use with the Ogerpon EX in a deck than I have had the Mantine, and so this card is another way to win a game. And that's why I think out of all of the cards that I have mentioned, Ogerpon EX is probably the most exciting and fun to play with within the new Snorlax Stall deck that I've built. And that's it. Those are the 5 cards that I think from the Twilight Masquerade that will improve Snorlax Stall in the long run, or just give it a bit more, what you could say, a bit of a wake-up call. You know, make it a bit more exciting to use, and give it some new cards to use. Alright. And if you want to know more about how to play the Snorlax Stall deck, do check out this video. It will be up on the screen. It will have done on basically a deck guide on how to play Snorlax Stall for you. Otherwise, that'll be it, and have a great day.